Economic Development Board. It's Wednesday, May 2nd, and we've got a pretty full agenda today, and we're going to jump right into it. Bear with me just a sec. Got to talk to the boss. Just a minute. Okay, so good afternoon. Welcome to the board. I'd like to start by going around the table and asking each member to state their name and the jurisdiction or organization you're representing. And also make sure you sign the attendance sheet. If you haven't already done so, we'll send it around so you can sign. Let's go ahead and start on my left here.
Hello, my name is Mariah Batiste, and I'm with the City of Issaquah as a City Council member.
Okay. Welcome, Mariah.
Hi, I'm Caroline King. I'm the CEO of the nonprofit Washington STEM.
Betty Capistani, Bellevue Chamber of Commerce.
Melinda Goforth, EDC, Seattle and King County.
Ryan Calkins, Port of Seattle Commissioner.
Bruce Kendall, Economic Development Board, Tacoma, Pierce County.
Abe Wonderta, Trade Development Alliance of Greater Seattle.
I'm Alex Peach from Washington State University.
Good afternoon, Emily Whitman with Puget Sound Regional Council.
Jason Thibodeau, also with Puget Sound Regional Council.
Josh Brown, PSRC Executive Director.
Patrick Pierce, Economic Alliance, Snohomish County.
Sorry, Tony Toe, Homesite, Regional Equity Network.
Brian Bonlander, Director, Washington State Department of Commerce.
I'm Stan Sorsher, representing Organized Labor.
Ed Stern, Paulsbo City Council, representing the cities of Kitsap County.
Conrad Lee.
Lydia Safa Dawson, City of Federal Way, representing SCA.
Good afternoon. Axel Stricklejohn, Port of Bremerton, Commissioner.
John Powers. John Powers, Kitsap Economic Development Alliance.
Shannon Reynolds, City of Faircrest, representing Pierce County Regional Council.
Connie Ladenburg, Pierce County Council.
Ruth Wiesman, PSRC.
Great. And so I know some people are calling in, so Ruth, could you take the attendance from the telephone participants?
Okay, we already have Mayor Greg Wheeler. Commissioner Ed Wolf. Are you there?
Present. Sitting in for Commissioner Garrido.
Okay. And then Deputy Mayor Nick Harper.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
And then Rebecca Lovell, Seattle.
I'm here, City of Seattle. Thank you.
All right, great. Anyone else on the phone?
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I know that Claire Petrich was going to try to call in. She's got conflicting meetings out of state, so if we hear a beep at some point, she may be joining us.
That's great. Yeah, if we take any votes, and then we'll ask. We'll ask at that time if somebody calls in. So next item on the agenda here is communications, public comments. So each member of the public wishing to give comment has 2 minutes to speak. We have an on-screen timer so that speakers will be able to see how much time is remaining. We discourage people from using obscenities and personal attacks, so please be mindful of that as you're giving public testimony today in a respectful way. Do we have anybody that'd like to speak to the committee, the board? Just step up to the microphone, and if you could just state into the microphone, if you just state your name for the record, and then you have 2 minutes to speak, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, my dirty AA Führer, a Nazi social democratic mafia with progressive Gestapo principle. My name is Alex Zimmerman, I'm president of Stand Up America. Couple of weeks ago, this election in this room, bicycle something, so 2 candidates, so somebody give me chance, I ask simple question. Who can explain to me what is mean personal attack and what is mean freedom of speech? Nobody answered me in, everybody told me shut up. So I'm shut up, no problem. Guys, I try understand, and I told you many times before, you're a natural born degenerate idiot. You change constitution. Personal attack, where is you find this? In freedom of speech, U.S. or state Washington Constitution, in law, but you all accept this. So my question to you, to everybody, when you thinking you acting here like a natural born degenerate idiot, so in another place you will be different. When you born like an idiot, you will die like an idiot. This is exactly what has become to collapse. I give you a small example so you can understand who you are. It's from your idiotic mentality, we come to pure fascism, but as I call fascism with idiotic face, with Nazi Gestapo principle. A commie Nazi fascist is exactly who you are, because by definition, when you can change constitution here, you can be only mentally sick or Nazi. Sorry, it's my personal opinion. So right now I speak to everybody who listen to me. I don't think so somebody listen outside this room. But stand up America, stand up Washingtonian. Stand up 4 million people who you represent. Clean this dirty chamber from this freaking Nazi fascist idiot. Stand up America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next person. And if you can
Thank you,
state
Mr.
your name
Chair.
for the record.
I'm Tim Clark. I am a trustee from Green River Community College.
Welcome.
And this organization obviously was running at one time an education dashboard. I don't know if you're still continuing that. But clearly in terms of how the community college system should be supporting the economic environment of the region, I would just like to comment. The opening up by the state board of allowing community colleges to grant those 4-year degrees in very select areas is paying real dividends. And I just thought I would share one story that would bring that into focus. At Green River College, we were granted the right to offer 2 4-year degrees in information technology, and one of those was system security. I am very pleased to announce that I will be heading back with the head of that department to Huntsville, Alabama, where Green River has, in their information technology department, been awarded by NSA and Homeland Security a Center of Excellence designation for their cybersecurity program. So it's working. Please keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair? Yes. First, I want to thank the speaker. Just to let you know that in our strategy plan that we adopted late last year, we have a big component in there about education. So maybe, Josh, if I can ask you to meet with him and share that information with him, it might be helpful, I think, beneficial to you.
Absolutely, and I think this is really timely. Really grateful for your public comments, and we look forward to following up on this.
Okay, bear with me just a second. So the next item on the agenda here is staff report. Josh?
Oh, this is Claire Petrus. Just wanted to let you know I'm here.
Claire, thank you for letting us know.
Terry, do you want to do your president's report first, or would you like me to go with staff?
Why don't I do that?
Okay.
If that's all right. So we're trying to follow the script here. So I do want to say we have a lot of work today. We had a couple of action items. I do want to let the board know we were surprised to receive some last-minute emails. We will pull action item 6A from the agenda so I can talk with Connie about this, and we'll bring it back to a future meeting. So we will not be acting on item 6A today. Aside from that, sad to report this to you, but Ruth Wiesman up here is going to be leaving. I have an important news to share. Some of you probably already know, but today will be Ruth's last meeting at the Economic Development Board here at the Puget Sound Regional Council. After nearly 20 years away, she's decided to move back to her hometown of Chicago. Ruth started at the Puget Sound Regional Council in September 2009, and she has supported the Economic Development Board since that time. During that time, she served with 6 presidents, Councilmember John Shelminack, Commissioner Claire Petrich, Councilmember Dave Gossett, Councilmember Ed Stern, Deputy Mayor Catherine Stanford, and myself. I had the opportunity to work more closely with Ruth, starting with my time on the board and then as vice president, as the board worked through the most recent economic strategy, and now as board president. And Ruth, she's very shy, so I don't think she was expecting this. So, during that time, I've appreciated how diligent and professional you've been in supporting the board meetings, the board members, and the countless things you do behind the scenes, between messages or meetings to make it all come together. You're one of the most competent people I've ever worked with. You're wonderful to work with. You're a great human being, and we're really going to miss you. And I've give this analogy when other people leave. It's kind of like when you live in a great neighborhood and you drive home every night and you're just kind of like, wow, I live in a great neighborhood. And then one night you come home and there's a for sale sign on your neighbor's house, and your heart just sinks and you're like, gosh, you know, I wish I'd spent more time with that neighbor and whatnot. And that's the way we feel about you. And I just want to tell you, I really enjoy working with you, and we're really going to miss you. But we wish you the very best as you go back home.
Thank you.
Yeah, is there anything? Josh?
Yeah, Ruth, we have just been so fortunate to have you on our team here at PSRC. And, you know, a lot of folks thought the Cubs would never win a World Series. Fortunately, they did. Ruth hasn't confirmed if that had something to do with moving back home, the fact that they got a winning club. But kidding aside, all of you on this board know that your point of contact for the work that we do is Ruth. And we're really blessed here at PSRC just to have amazing folks that their title may be working in administration, in an administrative role, but they go above and beyond to support all of you and board members. So, Ruth, we're going to miss you so much, and but know that this is where your heart is, and getting back to meet with family and friends, and going back home, and we just couldn't be any happier. Thanks for all that you've done.
I'm going to have a lot of great stories to tell people back home. No, it's been great. Working here, I've gotten to see things all over the region. The Boeing factory, the lab in South Lake Union, so many things. And some of you have become friends. And I really do wish all of you the very best. It's been great working with you.
But don't leave early. We have to finish this meeting. And we can't do it without her. Okay. Josh, I think
ready now.
Go to you.
Yeah, with the staff report. Well, first, thanks for everybody being here. We actually have sunshine outside today. It's a pleasant day. You're all here doing the important work of our Economic Development Board, so just appreciate your time. Since our last meeting, we've been busy at the staff level, and both Jason and Emily are going to give updates on the implementation work that we're doing on behalf of you and our regional economic strategy. But the other thing that I've been doing is going out meeting with many of our new and returning board members. So as I look around the table, we've had a lot of great one-on-one conversations talking about the fact that we adopted our strategy last year. Now we're focused on implementation. How can we collaborate with all of you? And I'm really grateful to Mr. Clark for being here, giving us a really important reminder on the role that our community college system plays in our state. I know for many years, Dr. David Mitchell from Olympic College served on this board, so that was something that he was always provided a strong reminder on, and we really look forward to working with you to collaborate and trying to find some rich opportunities moving forward. A couple other items I wanted to highlight before we jump into the rest of the meeting. First, you have a couple information items that I'd point out. First, item 8A is an Amazing Place update. Of course, Amazing Place is our regional economic strategy. And what staff will be doing at future meetings is providing this two-pager, giving an update on various efforts that we're doing, but also spotting some other opportunities or efforts that align with our strategy. So, as you know, you and other partners outside of this room are doing some heavy lifting to help implement the regional economic strategy, and we want to be able to use this as a resource for the board. So just wanted to point that out as something that we want to use as a way to communicate with all of you. The second thing I'd point out, and for a number of years at PSRC, we've been talking about 1 million more residents moving to our region between now and 2040. So we have a little more than 4 million residents in the region today. We've been planning for about 5 million residents in our region by 2040. Well, in January, we released our draft macroeconomic forecast for the region's growth. And the number's a little bigger. So between now and 2050, we're forecasting that the region will have 5.8 million residents in our region by 2050. So we'll go from 4 million residents today to 5.8 million residents in 2050. We'll also see an addition of 1.2 million jobs in that period of time. So we briefed all of our other policy boards here at PSRC on this macroeconomic forecast, which is the first step in extending the planning horizon for all of our plans here at PSRC, whether it's Vision 2040, which will become Vision 2050, our regional growth strategy, or our transportation plan. But the other thing I thought was important to point out that we shared with our executive board was, so in past forecasts, how accurate have we been? So 2020 is right around the corner, right? Less than 2 years away. What have we been projecting for our growth in 2020? Well, the answer is, if you go back to the first economic forecast that PSRC did in 1988 for a 2020 planning horizon, we've been around 2.5% of where we're going to end up in 2020. So my point is, by 2050, could we have 5.9 million residents? Could we have 5.7? Sure. We'll be around 2.5, maybe 3% of that 5.8 million total. But we're not going to have 7 million residents in the region, and we're not going to have 5 million residents in the region. We're going to be around 5.8. So, I think our executive board came away looking at our forecasting work and with a strong level of confidence. In terms of other items that I wanted to highlight for all of you, the other big thing that's underway here at PSRC on the transportation side of our house is we're in the final stages of updating the region's transportation plan. The executive board took action on recommending to our General Assembly meeting adoption of the regional transportation plan. That passed unanimously. Our General Assembly meets on May 31st, where we'll be taking action on adopting our budget work program. It's a supplemental budget, so there's minor changes this year, as well as electing officers and then adopting the plan. But the point I wanted to maybe express to all of you, many of you are working, trying to recruit and retain companies in our region. You're on the front lines of economic development in our region. I think an important thing that we should be communicating to our business community and folks we're trying to influence to do business here is we have an enormous amount of projects underway. So just in our region, there's over 600 projects underway in our transportation improvement program over the next 4 years that amounts to about $12 billion worth of projects. This is an amazing undertaking. And that $12 billion of projects, these are transportation projects of all type. It's light rail, it's highway projects, it's city streets, county roads, sidewalks, ferries, everything. That's leveraging nearly $30 billion of projects that are going to be brought online. So, we can all agree that these are projects we wish we would have done 10, 20, 30 years ago. A lot of you worked on projects like the 509 and 167 extension or our light rail projects. We can all agree these, we'd all be in a better spot if we would have got those projects done 10, 20, 30 years ago. But they're happening now. They're really important, and I think they're helping position our region to be stronger moving forward. So that's an update for me and some of the other work that we're doing at PSRC. I'd love to hand it over to Jason and Emily to give an update on the 2 implementation action items that the board has adopted that they're doing the heavy lifting on. So, Jason?
Yes, thank you. Very briefly. So work is progressing on the action item that's been adopted to develop a regional space sector study. We're working with Burke Consulting on that, and they're on track to have results available starting in June. They've been talking with regional space companies to gather information on the industry and the challenges and opportunities that those companies face. They've used the interviews as well as some economic analysis and employment data to develop an initial working industry definition and identify other national and international competitors to us for future jobs and investments in that industry. And so some things that they're working on right now moving forward. So they're refining that industry definition and then using it to perform an economic analysis, an impact analysis for the region, analyzing the talent needs of the industry, and then our regional talent pipeline in order to help meet those. Documenting policies and programs that other regions have to support the space industry, in addition to looking at the ones that we have here, and wrapping that all up in a SWOT analysis comparing our region to others. And hopefully we can use this to queue up some next steps in order to help grow that industry in the region. So they are scheduled to present their work here at the next meeting in July, so you'll have an opportunity to hear from them what they're finding and to ask questions and provide feedback about that work.
Emily.
I thought Jason was going to get grilled with questions there. So since the last time the board met, the Governor's Choose Washington NMA Council has been hard at work preparing the whole state to not only be ready for this one plane opportunity, but to strengthen the entire aerospace supply chain and industry across Washington. You have a copy of the press release that we issued in April, but I'm going to back up a little bit. Since we met in February, we also met as a council in March. We did that up at Wazoo Everett, which if you have not been, it's a fantastic facility, and we thank Wazoo so much for helping to set that up. At that meeting, we announced our co-chairs who are serving as the face of our effort and helping to guide our strategic actions. The first one is Rick Bender, who many of you probably know. He was a legislator for, I think, 19 years and then president of the Washington State Labor Council. He's been an outstanding member of our leadership team. As well, we have Dr. Noel Schulz, who is, in addition to being an outstanding professor in engineering, is also First Lady of Washington State University and has an excellent track record in increasing diversity among faculty members and inclusion of women in STEM in particular, and she's bringing a wonderful perspective to this as well. In April, we met in Spokane, so I think that was our highest turnover of council members, many of whom are in this room. Thank you for flying over. We had a great meeting in Spokane. I would like to say, in particular, all 4 of our region's ADOs were present and part of the conversation over there. Were excellent to see them interacting with Robin Toth, who's the business recruiter for the ADO over in Spokane, and what better way to show that this industry really is statewide than to have those leaders all together in the same room in Spokane, highlighting the industry's impact over there and in their own communities. So thank you to the 4 of you for attending. As well, the next day we went to Moses Lake, members of the Executive Council did, and took a tour of some of the facilities there as well as the port to see what their capacity is and learn more about Boeing's presence there in particular. Something I'd like to share from both of our visit in Everett and our visit in Spokane is that we went and toured Everett Community College as well as AMTech, which is their Advanced Manufacturing Technical Education Center. I probably got a little bit of that wrong, sorry. And then in Spokane, we went to Spokane Community College. And at both campuses, the educators we engaged with said nearly the exact same thing. I thought somebody may have, pitched them this talking point, but that is companies in their region are begging them for their students, begging them for 10 more like the one that they just got. Students up at AmTech had just toured the Composite Wing Center that Boeing made an investment up in Snohomish County, and the recruiter for that facility personally emailed every single one of those students who said, we are ready to have you here. You have the exact skill, the soft skills, the hard skills that we've been looking for before they've even graduated. We heard the same thing over in Spokane as well, that employers are ready to expand and they're having trouble finding qualified students to fit their need. And so that's something that our group continues to work on. We have a workforce development work group on our council who is putting together a strategy for that. Our next meeting will be in May in Pierce County, and thank you to Bruce for helping set that up. We also have initiated a fundraising campaign. So again, thank you to Pierce County, thank you to Snohomish County, thank you for the EDC Seattle-King County, and thank you to UW for making initial commitments. Many of your communities, whether it's your mayor or yourself, have also received a similar fundraising request. We can't do this work without a little bit of money to help. I'm being loaned out in kind, but there is more that needs to be done, and we certainly need some contributions to help do that. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. I have nothing else to say. I want to pitch it over to Brian Bondlander, our Director of the Department of Commerce, if he has anything he wants to add about the governor's work on this, as well any of the other members who were on that trip out east. Would like to hear your thoughts if you like.
Thanks, Emily. That was a great description and update of where we are. I guess the only other thing I would add is that there's still a lot of unknowns out there in terms of the timing with the company, and when we expect, or if we expect an RFP, their exact approach they'll take to this. I think where we're getting some signs that it's going to be later rather than sooner than we had anticipated. But again, it's sort of conjecture. We got some indication with a meeting request that we made with some local electeds that the company thought that was premature, and we had been hearing that we might be looking at first quarter of next year, but it could still happen in the next few months. For all we know, they might make an announcement around Farnborough. And so that's what we're preparing for, and that's the schedule that we're sort of working against. We expect to have a competitiveness report that we've done through a contract with the Teal Group, with Richard Albalafia, that would take a look at our region and regions around the country and compare their relative competitiveness for building and assembling and designing airplanes. And so we think that that's going to be a very solid piece of work and something that provides a better picture of aerospace than some of the other studies that are done on a somewhat regular basis, but often use data that isn't entirely, doesn't get a good an accurate picture of what's actually going on, not just in our state, but other states as well. So that's my update, but I'd open it up to other participants. John, Stan, anyone?
Could you turn the mic on?
Thank Emily. You're doing a great job staffing the council, and I appreciate the PSRC loaning a valuable staff member to assist it. It's really made a difference, and the meetings have been very statewide in nature and collaborative. We really appreciate that.
Happy to help.
I would add that this is emblematic of when the ecosystem works well in the state, the economic development ecosystem. It's just been superb. A new governor this time, or a governor that hasn't been through one of these projects before. Well, 777X, of course, but we've done this through two other previous governors, and it's worked then as well. The PSRC's participation is fantastic. Emily, as I agree with John, it's working, and Brian's leadership has just been superb. His staff's been great, and it's the moving target of when this thing's going to drop, and it's great. Stan's been through. Since the beginning of time, Stan's been working on airplanes. He likes when I say stuff like that. So it is a really robust process.
I'd just like to echo all the thank yous and appreciation, and as well, and make sure to recognize Aerospace Futures Alliance, our industry association, is doing great work on this as well, and just think that it's a great opportunity for all of us, and just encourage. Reiterate Emily's plea there. Just this does take all of our collective resources, both in time and treasure and talent, to make these things successful. So appreciate all of your current and future contributions to the effort.
And it should be noted that EASC is serving as the council's fiscal agent, so that was a very appropriate pitch there. Thanks, Patrick. Don't wait
budget
until...
co-chair at work.
Yeah, budget chair, yeah. Along with Rick Olson here. Well, he's watching somewhere. Don't wait until the next EDD board meeting to learn about this. We have a website, so the link to it is on the back of the press release I handed out. It is www.nma.choosewashington.com. So that will always be updated with new announcements and other information, in addition to other articles and press that comes out about this effort. And if you have any questions at any time, please let me know.
Great job, Emily. Thank you very much. I should have rolled back. I should have asked, did anybody have any questions for Jason after his presentation?
Questions for any of us? No?
Quick one, Jason. On the space front, Will you be participating, or will there be delegates from our local community at the New Space Conference that I think is hosted in, is it Bellevue or Renton this coming June? Yeah, there's a New Space Conference that'll be coming, East Side presence, I think. Do you know what's going on around organizing attendance at that?
So we are not directly helping to coordinate that event, but I know we are working closely with the Washington State Space Coalition, and they have participants in helping to organize that. The plan is to roll some of this information out at that event as well, so it'll be an opportunity to highlight some of the work that we're doing there.
Great. Tony?
Thank you. This is really hearkening back to Josh's report. It took me a while to process the 800,000 more residents. And usually when I come to these meetings, I leave my housing hat at home. But over the last few months, I had the opportunity to serve on the Progressive Revenues Task Force in the city and learned a lot about homelessness, which is in my area. And then recently we've been working with the realtors, the master builders, and the Mortgage Bankers Association, of which we are a member, on the condo insurance crisis. And it has to do with workforce housing. And I think we really, even from the time that we did the Housing Affordability Response Team, task force with the governor to now, which is probably, what, 6 months or something like that? The housing crisis has taken, the Mortgage Bankers Association representative at a meeting that I was at yesterday basically was concerned that conventional mortgages no longer apply in Seattle and King County because there's a loan limit of somewhere around $800,000. And so jumbo loans are becoming a standard, and that really whacks out the real estate markets. I've been feeling it, but I didn't realize it until this comment came up in the meeting yesterday, and the realtors are reeling at the lack of affordable, moderate price housing. Their industry is being impacted. So I don't know if there's a way, when we look at how strong our economy is and the whole jobs thing, that somehow maybe we could do something to have someone look at the housing jobs ratio. You might have seen the article in the Seattle Times this week about 100,000 jobs and 32,000 housing units. If this trend continues, it will start to affect our economy. So I just want to make a suggestion that maybe at some future meeting that we have someone that's been dealing with this issue, maybe, or maybe even within PSRC, there's work going on this. I really would like to spend a little bit of time looking at this housing jobs issue and how it impacts our Vision 2050.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me help out there. And Tony, I agree with everything you're saying. So as I said about, our agency's release of the draft 2050 economic forecast, and I may have heard you incorrectly, but it's 1.8 million more residents between now and 2050 in our region. We're also, and including your packet as an information item, we're in the throes of beginning our effort to update Vision to 2050 with that new planning horizon. My sense from our elected leadership in the region is that affordability is going to be a paramount concern, an issue that they're going to want to focus on. In fact, we just did a survey here at PSRC, 2,000 folks that live in the region. It's statistically valid survey of our entire region. And if you would have done a survey like this and asked folks what their biggest concern is in our region, if you would have done a survey 8 or 9 years ago, far and away the #1 issue would have been jobs in the economy. We did do a survey at PSRC similar to this about 4 years ago, and far and away the #1 issue was transportation. The survey that we just commissioned, far and away the biggest concern that residents of the region have today is affordability. Transportation is #2, but there's a pretty big gap between affordability and transportation. Affordability is the issue that is on people's minds. And what's interesting is if you ask, when you go further down the list, the #3 item is jobs in the economy. And I don't think it's a function of the fact that people can't find a job. Folks are having difficulty finding a job to afford living in our region or having a reasonable commute to balance their quality of life. So absolutely, Tony, I think that'll be, very much a topic of the work that we do with Vision 2050, and I think your suggestion about finding some ways to think about that issue, and of course, making sure that we have, affordable housing in our region is an element of our economic strategy. I think that's incredibly timely, and we'd love to follow up.
I would like to second all that. I think that this is things that are within our control, outside of what might be happening on the other side of the country, and other Washington and some other things. This is I think the biggest challenge that I see to the long-term health of our economy and the health and strength of our communities. And we see models for what happens when this uncontrolled constraint on housing supply occurs. We need to look no further than California, multiple cities in California, and I think that there's a lesson there that we should avoid, and it's going to take organizations like this to do that, and recognition of by this group of the impact on that kind of escalation of housing valuations and rents can cause on the economy.
Connie.
Thank you. I just want to add a little stat that I just read about in Pierce County. I was sharing earlier with someone. In the last, it's either 4 or 5 years in Pierce County, housing costs have gone up 49% and wages have gone up 4.4%, which just reiterates everything that everyone says. And I'm sure that each of our counties has similar types of numbers, that they can bring forward. So as we, Pierce, the EDD, look at this, Josh, we really do need to look at our individual counties and not just the whole region. So we have to put it in perspective because we're all affected differently this way. I know that probably King County has been experiencing something that's somewhat new to us. In Pierce County, just recently, we had an apartment owner evict everyone from the apartment. He wants to, upgrade his apartment and, raise the rents. Meanwhile, we've got all these people that now have no place to live, and I just got an email today with another apartment building doing the same thing. And it's just the beginning. I know we're going to see more and more of that, and I don't know what we're going to do about it, but it's very sad. But it does impact, especially the wage piece of it and the jobs piece of it is something that, we really, I think all of us around this table are very concerned about.
And the survey that we did, we have both regional and county by county numbers. And you're right, Councilmember Ladenburg, that in terms of the counties where affordability is, the biggest concern is also the counties where we've created the most jobs. So King #1 and Snohomish #2. One of the things that was surprising to me a little bit is on the homelessness front, it was actually Pierce County where in the survey it had the most concern from residents. So we're going to be getting that information out to our membership and other partners to help inform the important work that's in front of us.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on with our agenda now. We have a consent agenda. Item A is approved minutes of the meeting held February 7th, and also approved vouchers dated February 14th through February 21st, the amount of is that right? $113.57.
Wow.
Yeah, Bruce just said big spenders.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second from Tony Toe.
Oh, okay.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Passed unanimously.
Sorry, was this the opportunity to propose an amendment to the minutes?
An amendment to the minutes?
Yes,
do you have a correction?
As much as I enjoy working closely with Councilmember Herbold, my last name is actually Lovell. I was listed as Rebecca Herbold in the minutes from February.
That is an excellent catch. And Rebecca, we know who you are, so that got past us. So my apologies. That's embarrassing.
So we'll take that as a friendly
I'll
amendment.
Fix it.
Scribner error. Okay, we'll get that done. Thank you, and sorry for that error. So next item on the agenda. Next item on the agenda is the action item. So this is the implementation action item, regional baseline study, and then after that we're going to have a discussion item. We have a guest here today, and I want to make sure we stay on time. So if you have some questions for Josh about this, if you could kind of formulate those as we go, that'd be great. And then if we have a bunch of questions, the way to do this is kind of put your tent up so I know that you want to speak, and then we'll just take those in order and everybody will get their questions answered.
Right, absolutely. So I'll take over. So again, for both new and returning board members, you have two areas of focus for this board. One is development and adoption of a strategy, which we accomplished last year. The second is focus on implementing the strategy. You heard the great work that Jason and Emily are doing on a pair of the action items that this board took up a few months ago. So staff has a recommendation on a third action item that we'd like the board to consider to add as an implementation action for a regional economic strategy, and it's focused on a regional aviation baseline study. So we'll be coming back to this, but the recommended action is development of a regional aviation baseline study as an implementation action for Amazing Place. This study will provide a clear picture of the aviation activities and needs in the region and set the stage for future planning efforts. So what I'm going to do today is give you a quick flyover of different trends that we're seeing in our region. I know we have Commissioner Calkins here and Councilmember Ryan who have worked these issues from their respective jurisdictions, so feel free to chime in if there's some additional points you'd like to make. And then what I want to do is give you an overview of what would be encompassed in this regional aviation baseline study. And if you serve on our executive board or our transportation policy board, you've been hearing about this topic in the past few months. So while this may be new for some members of this board, I know we also have some elected officials who have been paying attention to this issue pretty closely. Pat, did you have a question now?
Actually, I just want an opportunity somewhere to comment on the draft scope for this aviation study.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks a ton. So probably no surprise to all of you, if you've been at SeaTac International Airport lately, you've noticed how busy it is. And, there's certainly been a lot of commentary around in our local papers about just the fantastic growth that we've seen at SeaTac. And, it's connected to the thriving economy that we have here in the region and so many businesses that rely on SeaTac to get to the places in the world they need to go to be able to do business. If you look at SeaTac International Airport today, it's the 9th busiest airport in the United States. And if you look back, depending on the period of time, but if we just take the past half a dozen years, just phenomenal growth at SeaTac. One of the things I would point out is we have more folks coming in and out of SeaTac International Airport today than the International Airport in Houston and Miami. Now, granted, those are regions that also have secondary airports, but Houston is much larger than the Seattle region. So we have certainly an airport in our region that in terms of growth and focus, it's really reflective of the strength of the region's economy and the state of Washington. We also at SeaTac have seen a recent surge in cargo growth. So I serve on the state's air cargo task force today, where we're looking statewide in terms of the cargo sector. SeaTac is far and away #1 in terms of moving air cargo. #2 on the list is Boeing Field. #3 is Spokane. Our other airports are just very, very minimal numbers. But you'll notice a percentage change for SeaTac of nearly a 20% increase year over year. Well, what's fueling that? Well, there's certainly new freighters there. If you've been at the airport, you've noticed the prime planes that are flying. But an important point to consider at SeaTac, unlike Boeing Field, where you have actual freighters that are just carrying cargo moving in and out, a lot of the cargo that comes in and out of SeaTac is in the belly of wide-body international flights. So as we're getting more and more international flights into SeaTac connecting Seattle to the world and our region of the world, you're seeing that cargo really increase. We're all familiar with SeaTac. One of the things I point out is there's a lot of things that are underway right now. You've noticed the North Star project, the addition of several gates at the satellite terminal, at the North Satellite Terminal. You're seeing the work on the arrivals facility. There's just a host of projects that have been underway and have been worked on for a number of years out at SeaTac. Also underway right now, SeaTac and the Port of Seattle are in the midst of updating their Sustainable Airport Master Plan. So one of the things that takes place at all of the airports in our region is you have to have these periodic updates of master plans. And what I would say is today, all of our master plans are in various stages. So we have some master plans at airports that have been completed. Some that, like the Sustainable Airport Master Plan at SeaTac that's underway today, covering planning through 2034. Others haven't started yet, so they're in various stages of planning work. And Commissioner, I don't want to call you out, but is there any other points you may want to make on anything out of the port these days?
No, I think you're doing a great job here, and I will chime in during comments.
Perfect.
With some additional
Okay, great.
stuff.
So, we're well aware that, the region's airport, however, it's not just SeaTac. We have an enormous, diverse set of assets in our region. Up in Payne Field, of course, our major manufacturing focus for the wide-body planes for Boeing, major manufacturing hub. You've also seen in the newspapers that we have a new terminal under construction. There's, the two-gate terminal up at Payne Field in terms of options for Alaska, United Southwest. There's a lot of, great options that are coming online just in a few months. Councilmember Ryan, I know this is, a topic, that you've been paying attention to and provided a lot of leadership on over the years. And of course, manufacturing, just if you look at Renton and the enormous increase in production of our 737 line, we talked about Payne Field, Boeing Field in terms of the important role that it plays both for cargo, but also final delivery and finishing work on planes. There's just a whole host of things that are happening with our aviation assets in the region today. So how does this fit with the economic strategy? One of the things we've been pretty clear with all of you on is that when we tackle an implementation item or we're going to bring one up to you, it has to have alignment within our strategy. Well, when you adopted our regional economic strategy, you were really clear that we should be thinking about getting prepared for aviation planning in our region. So right out of our economic strategy, long-term strategy is needed to ensure the region's aviation capacity continues to match the needs of an expanding population and economy. This goal, this strategy is in support of our Compete Globally goal to sustain and grow air travel connections both domestically and globally. And of course, we know that it supports key industries in our region: transportation and logistics, aerospace, tourism, and information technology. So there's a really clear nexus with the economic strategy. The purpose of this aviation baseline study will provide a clear picture of the aviation activities and needs in the region and set the stage for future planning. So what's covered? As I said about the master plans, they're in various stages in the region today. What we don't have is a full look regionally at both demand and capacity of our aviation system. And when I say system, we're thinking about passengers, we're thinking about cargo, we're thinking about manufacturing, of course, because of military installations both in our region and places like Whidbey Island. There's layers of that. We're also, though, thinking about not only what's on the ground, how many gates you need, how much taxi space do you need, but we're also thinking about airspace constraints, which folds into this. It's pretty obvious that what happens at SeaTac International Airport in terms of the airspace with Boeing Field and Renton and even up to Payne Field and down to McCord gets pretty tight pretty quickly. So this proposed aviation baseline study would provide the analysis to understand a range of both demand and capacity issues that we need to think about and get us prepared for that next level of planning. The other element that this regional aviation baseline study would provide is help understand community profiles. What are issues on the ground that we need to be thinking about? What are, from our diverse communities in the region, there's a mix of both, challenges and opportunities that our airports provide. How can we get smarter about this moving forward and inform state leaders? So what we're imagining is, as we move forward with this process and complete a regional aviation baseline study, that the region's leadership would then give this study to the governor and other state leaders to help inform that next level, that next phase of planning in our region. So our draft schedule, and I want to back up here a little bit on this because we're bringing this to you as the Economic Development Board as an action item for our economic strategy. PSRC's executive board has already taken action to direct me and my team to move forward with this effort. So we were approached by the Federal Aviation Administration late last year, to consider doing some type of aviation study. I briefed our leadership at PSRC earlier in this year, and the board took action a couple months ago to direct me and my team to move forward with this effort. So included in your packet, and Pat, brought this up at the beginning. We have a draft scope of work, so that's what is out there today. We need to negotiate that scope of work with our partners at the Federal Aviation Administration. And we've received a lot of good feedback from partners on elements of that work. Of course, we'll have to agree with our federal partners, but happy to get some feedback today and we can work offline on that. We've already begun the competitive process to bring on a consultant for this work. So our team here at PSRC, we've already interviewed consultants and are in the process of finalizing a selection. We're also finalizing with the FAA securing a grant. This will be about $1 million project, and we're working with our federal partners to get that funded. Our timeline is to get that finalized sometime in June, that grant and selection of the consultant. We would imagine that we would kick off this study sometime in July of 2018. It would be about an 18-month project, so at the end of 2019 we have a completed study. And again, a completed study that could help inform the region's leadership of what we need to get prepared for moving forward. So with that, this is the action that we have for you today, is to align your economic work with our regional transportation planning work at PSRC, and to develop a regional aviation baseline study as an implementation action item for Amazing Place, our regional economic strategy. And again, we're already moving forward with this effort over on the with our PSRC team, and look forward to answering any questions that folks may have on this.
Ed?
Sorry, can I chime in?
Excuse me, my apologies. Go ahead.
So a couple of other things that I want to get out there as context. One is to understand that as a Port Commission, as an entity at SeaTac, our stated preference is that we take the notion that maximizing the use of the capital asset we already have, which is SeaTac, first before we look to sort of divvy up resources on a second regional airport is essential. Recognizing that SeaTac is going to hit max capacity at some point in the not too distant future. And to kind of contextualize that, we have 1,400 acres, and as you saw on the slide earlier, at about 50 million passengers. Denver has 17,000 acres with 60 million passengers. So they're planning to grow to 12 runways. We have 3, and we will always have 3. So we have all sorts of, it's a much smaller puzzle for us to fit all those pieces into than many of our peer airports around the country. So that's one. The other is the maximum number of passengers that we can fit through SeaTac is not simply a question of if we have all the best technology to land all the planes possible and we upgauge as many of those planes as we can, and all the traffic problems and all the baggage movement issues are resolved, what is that number? It's also recognizing that aviation has broad-based benefits for everyone in the region, but some very acute impacts on airport communities. We have to balance those two needs. So we're looking at that very seriously, and in our SAMP process, we're doing all sorts of public outreach, and we're looking for other leaders in the community to support us in those efforts to find that right balance. So I'd say those two things are really essential for us. And also, as we are conducting this Sustainable Airport Master Plan process, initially it was thought of as a single phase expansion to accommodate demand. What we're now finding is, because of how quickly our region is growing, we're breaking it into 2 phases because we need gates now to accommodate the growth that we've experienced in the last 5 years. So we're doing an early expansion process and then a second phase. So we're kind of accelerating part of it and moving some of it down the road to then be able to adapt to whatever comes out of this regional aviation baseline study.
Great. So we're going to go with Councilmember Stern, then Brian Bonlander, then Pat, and then Councilmember Ladenburg. So.
Thank you.
Oh, and Axel's up too.
So Josh, you answered my first question in your presentation at the end when I was going to ask why wasn't this included in the regional economic strategy, since it's such a baseline concurrency for infrastructure for economic development, but you answered that. So my question has to do with the ability of us to absorb this within the economic development district. Our plate's already robust with the new regional economic strategy. And I remember in the past, we used to grade projects where we were supporting an outside agency. We had taken it internally, but it wasn't a high priority, and then we had high priority. I'm wondering how this folds into the regional, into our economic development district, separate from PSRC, Executive Board, Department of Commerce, and all that. Our ability to absorb this.
We have the ability. So we already have PSRC staff that are actively working on this process. I've already assigned a project manager. So we're moving forward with this. So whereas Jason and Emily are leads on 2 of the other action items where we're providing support, this will be other elements of our PSRC team delivering this program. And of course, we'll need outside consultant help on a lot of the data analysis and work. But so absolutely, we're already getting this done, and the action today is to have that alignment. And to your point, Councilmember Stern, clearly in the strategy, we talked about how we need to focus on commercial aviation connections as a strategy within Amazing Place, and this just is an implementation item that completes that alignment.
Great. Mr. Bonlander?
Thank you. About 4 years ago, when Alex Peach and I when Alex was still at the state, we met with this company called Zunum, and this company said, "Hey, we want to build electric airplanes." And at the time, Alex and I think we both thought this wasn't realistic. After a long meeting, it sounded like, wow, these folks might know what they're talking about. Fast forward 2 or 3 years later, Boeing has invested in them, and there's a number of other Airbus has started their own similar foray into electric aircraft. And part of at least Zunum's approach is to maximize the use of general aviation and community airstrips around not just our region but others. The theory being that communities will be more comfortable with very quiet airplanes coming and going, commercial passenger airplanes, when normally it's really difficult to get commercial service into some of these places. And they're pursuing some legislation to take a look at this, but this study might make sense to look at disruptive technologies like that could play a role in our region, and perhaps helping to position ourselves for an entry into electric aviation here, to make ourselves a mecca for other companies to come and test out their technologies.
Absolutely, Brian. This would be a good place to point out what the study is and what it isn't. This study is not a siting study. So we're going to be looking at demand and capacity in the region, of all types. But we're not going to be saying, so what happens next? This will inform that next level of planning, and I think some of the things that you're talking about could potentially link up there. But it is a regional study, and while I may have spent most of the briefing focusing on our largest and most well-known airports, we're going to look at everything in the region. I've already had, for example, the mayor of Kenmore make sure that Kenmore Air and their float plane service is an element of the study, so that certainly will be in there. So, and as I spoke to at the beginning, as the state is moving forward with their air cargo study, we're going to make sure that we have alignment with that. So I think you're hitting an emerging opportunity, but I think this study will certainly provide us the bookends to be able to enter the next phase of planning, where topics like that I imagine will come up. What do we do next, and what are potential solutions or options? Is that fair?
Great. Ms. Iola Vera?
Thank you, Terry. You said 2 things I was really happy about. You mentioned the military, and you also mentioned airspace. And this morning down at Joint Base Lewis McChord, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force from around the state have been meeting today and tomorrow to talk about our airspace and the issues that we're having with encroachment on our airspace and the capacity that we have with the existing airspace to meet our mission requirements for training, RDT&E, and so forth in the future. We talked about the types of new technologies that are coming online how industry wants to use our restricted airspace or may be required to use our restricted airspace to test those new technologies, but we're at the same time having to project our needs and uses. And it's kind of funny because I ended up with a bunch of maps of some of our airspace, but you know, between the helicopters and the air wings at Joint Base Lewis McChord and at over in Spokane at Fairchild, and then our commercial partners, we're really jamming up that airspace. And the greater success we have economically in the region, the more competition there's going to be for that. So I'm really just want to say that as we think about, you know, our roads on the ground, our roads on the air are really getting crowded. And before people can land on the ground and go through baggage claim and a terminal and all that, this has got to get addressed. And so I just really am glad that you guys are talking about doing it, and just want to ensure that you speak to all branches of the military and Homeland Security, the Coast Guard and so forth about this issue.
Absolutely, Pat. Great reminder. And again, other regions might just focus on the passenger and cargo components, but because we have so much manufacturing happening in our region and the military component, again, both bases may be within our 4 counties, but we're going to pay attention to these issues that are outside of our 4 counties. So absolutely.
And they fly in all across the state and from around. Yeah. So, you know, it's one of those networking kinds of things.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Next up is Commissioner Stracklejohn, then Councilmember Lee, then Mrs. Asefa Dawson. So, Commissioner, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. President. Josh, just want to say thanks for the overview and really explaining the depth and the width of the study, because that was probably one of my top questions. But brings to mind some of the comments made by Commissioner Calkins is, you know, with 2050 heading very quickly on us, another 1.8 million people in the region, how much more density can we add to the SeaTac and surrounding areas? And, you know, I look at that and say, well, what services do we provide at SeaTac today that potentially could be shared otherwise, which would expand the scope of people and air transportation for people? You know, if you look at what's going on with the freight industry, a lot of people have moved out of the SeaTac airport properties. They've moved south toward Federal Way, toward Des Moines, because of the logistics, obviously, and the density that has occurred there in the last 20 years. And, you know, 1,400 acres, you're pretty much maximized there. And so glad to see we're having the scope. And, you know, of course, being with Bremerton National being 2,000 available acres, Ryan, you know, I always see what services can we move around and what can be shared in the region, north, south, or west, and perhaps to give additional relief to your facility and perhaps growing people transportation. So.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I support the study. I heard that, you know, obviously aviation is a big economic factor, you know, for the state. I do have 2 questions. One is I appreciate the port is studying this, doing this. It's a port's business. And I think it would be very useful. You know, it's part of the information of your operation and growth in the future. So my question is, why is not Port of Seattle pay for the study? I would imagine you would be interested in the same thing. But you don't need to answer me the question.
I have an easy one. Well, our partners at the FAA have offered, so that's what we're working with them. And it's the FAA and the port, for all these master plans that are happening throughout the region, and of course, airports are owned by ports, cities, counties in our region. You know, there's a mix of dollars going in to do those master plans, but our grant would be backed by the FAA. PSRC would be putting in a modest match to do this work, and it would take all that master planning that's in various phases and fold it into our regional assessment.
Okay, yeah, good. I hope that the port would find this study useful to contribute part of your financial support for this project. That'd be nice.
Noted. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, this is a global economic, issue. And so when you talk about, it's not a sighting, I hear that. But you talk about the study, you talk about other facilities, airports, and what we have, you know. And so I would recommend that we do not limit to just, when you say regional, it's not just King County, Snohomish County, Pierce County, or Bremerton, for example. I would suggest that this is an issue that affects the whole state. Moses Lake, for example, I mean, is potentially, it has a benefit of connecting Eastern Washington and Western Washington economically. I think that's a great opportunity. And we can figure out how to connect through people I've talked about before, high-speed rail, It's a matter of moving goods and people. That's the key. I think Brian mentioned using disruptive technology. There are many ways we can answer the question. The point is very interesting, right? We are interested in because we want to move people and goods. And this is an opportunity we can do. So I feel that maybe the scope can be larger rather than be specifically just, the airport we have here that's up for consideration. It's economic development for the whole state and hopefully globally as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we've committed to, while this will be focused in our region, be good partners with communities around our region as well as partners across the state. And so we're going to do that. Absolutely.
We have a couple more, then we're going to move on with our agenda. Ms. Asefa Dawson.
Thank you.
Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And my first time here, and I'm honored to be amongst you here. So as this study is happening, my curiosity actually is around passengers. So we're anticipating there's going to be a huge growth as businesses tend to start, have meetings and conferences via Skype and whatnot. So is that going to affect it? I know it's probably going to be part of the study, but from what we know now, do we even know where that trend is going and how it's going to impact the outcome of the number of passengers that we're going to anticipate in the future?
I think what you can expect is, in coordination with our consultants who will be the experts on answering those questions, they'll help us develop a range. So, what may come out of this analysis is not an exact number, but a range where there'll be some variables that, for both demand and capacity constraints, that we need to plan around.
And on the slide that Josh put up earlier that showed 2034 forecast demand of 66 million passengers, we always emphasize that is an unconstrained forecast. So it could be that we fail to build out assets sufficient to accommodate that, and we aren't going to be able to push 66 million people through. It might also be that we decide strategically that there is some excess demand in there because we didn't price it correctly, and we need to look at that as well. And so, we think we can, based on the projects that we have going right now, that we can hit the mid-50s, but everything else is based on partly receiving the results back from this and then saying, all right, what do we do at CTAC based on this regional aviation baseline study to then accommodate the additional growth that we need to. And I would also say that although this is not part of the scope, I think one of the responses that groups like ours will need to consider when we do get the data back is beyond aviation. What other modes of transit can accommodate some of the demand that we are currently, for instance, the dozens of flights to and from Portland each day? Do all of those need to be commercial aviation passengers, or are there ways to move them back and forth that are more efficient, while at the same time recognizing that for us to be efficient and productive as a hub airport, we need to be feeding folks into that system too.
Okay, so we'll go with Deputy Mayor Wen. Could you turn the microphone on, please?
I'm very impressed with all these wonderful studies and great projections, all the kinds of consideration. However, we also have to think about how people live, right? One of the biggest impact will be the noise. And with the airplane noise, in my city, we have been tracking it. It has been going bad and worse and worse, going to be impossible when it grows. And according to all the WHO study around the world, above 60 dB, you're going to have all kinds of stress and hormone issues and death and those kind of stuff impact the public health. And on the meantime, also with the highway traffic, the same thing with the bridge traffic, which we have been fighting for 2 years, and those past noises have been impact people's, especially kids' study concentration and people's health. So it's possible, like for PSRC, and collaborate with all the manufacturers or bridge designers and to look at how we're going to have next generation of the airplanes to have some regulation. They couldn't generate so much of the dBs. It causes more and more issues because it's going to have more and it will be saturated and it will be exponentially grows into a very disaster situation.
Well, absolutely. Again, we're not getting into citing with this study. This is just understanding a range of demand and capacity constraints in our region.
Yes.
But certainly you're highlighting, what we hear from a lot of communities in the region. They're, valid concerns. And as we enter into the next phase of planning on this complicated topic, those are going to be issues that I know policymakers and the residents of our region are going to bring up and look for solutions to deal with.
Yeah, it's good to be planning ahead as well because of if you limit what kind of airplane and producing what kind of noises, and then they will design some quiet airplane.
And I think it's important to point out we are anticipating within the next 6 months or so the results of a nationwide evaluation by the FAA to determine what the acceptable noise limit is, and they use very sophisticated modeling to determine how people in airport communities are impacted by that. And our hunch, based on what we've heard, is that they are going to actually reduce from 65 decibels to a lower number. We're not sure what is acceptable. And on the flip side, as you mentioned, can we make quieter airplanes? And in fact, airplanes have been getting quieter and quieter and quieter. And it's quite remarkable that, the biggest airplanes today are much quieter than the top of the line airlines coming out just 25, 30 years ago. So there are improvements on that side, and we are working closely with manufacturers. And at SeaTac, actually, each year we award the quietest airlines for following all the protocols to make sure that they're as quiet as possible. And surprisingly now, it's gotten to the point where it's not actually the jet noise that's the issue. It's simply moving a big object through the air at that speed generates noise, and whether it's the landing gear or tiny little holes on the side of the airplane where instruments measure wind speed and that kind of stuff. It's trying to figure out how to reduce all that noise, and they're succeeding quite well. But it's a process we need to continue to develop over time.
Great. Thank you very much. So I think at this point we're waiting for a motion, or do you have a question, Connie?
I do it, just a real quick comment, then I'm going to go right into the motion. I'm wondering if some of what you're going to be looking at will also consider fly zones or no-fly zones around airports. Like in Tacoma, just north of McCord, right now, the Air Force has basically said, this is a no-fly zone. You can't have any development there, houses, commercial, anything like that. So if we're talking about airports, expansion of airports, as she was mentioning earlier, I'm just wondering if that's going to be part of the study too.
Yeah, that's a great example of something we would likely highlight in those community profiles.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, thank you. But thank you. I will make a motion, if I may. I move to develop a regional aviation baseline study as an implementation action item for Amazing Place.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Ladenburg and a second by Councilmember Stern. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Great job, Josh. And Commissioner Calkins, thank you very much for your information. So next item on the agenda here is our discussion item, and we have a guest here. Matt, do you want to come up? Or Josh, would you like to introduce him?
I'll do a quick introduction. But before I hand it off, I wanted to talk about how this, the content of this presentation is aligned with the economic strategy, so you can get a little context of why we asked Matt to come here today. So one of the three goals that was adopted in Amazing Place was to open economic opportunities to everyone in the region. And one of the strategies to help meet that goal is to pay special attention to industry clusters that support the jobs in the region's rural communities and smaller cities. And because of this, in the work that we did, we included a broader set of industry cluster data looking beyond IT and aerospace and the big ones to see what other kind of strengths that we had, whether at the regional level or at the county level. And wood products was one of those clusters that we saw. Wood products, furniture, these jobs are present throughout the region, but they are concentrated. We have high concentration of those jobs in King, not in King, in all counties other than King in the region. And how do we continue to sustain those industry clusters? And we do that through innovation. And the history obviously the region obviously has a long history of wood and wood products innovation, from the early Boeing planes being made out of wood to the modern day, the advanced manufacturing that you're seeing in our furniture companies like Watson Furniture in Kitsap County. So we invited Matt Ojala here today, who's the Government Affairs Director from Forterra, who will talk about the opportunities of cross-laminated timber and mass timber as a more general term, and the work that they are leading up in the region to help grow this industry.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Matt Ojala. Again, I'm the Government Affairs Director at Forterra, and thank you for having me here to chat about something that we've been working on at Forterra, which is cross-laminated timber, or CLT for short. And I think I'll just go through, what is CLT, what Forterra's involvement has been, and what's happening here in the state. So I imagine a lot of you are familiar with Forterra, but for those who are not, we are a sustainability nonprofit based out of Seattle, and we work to protect what we call keystone places, and these are places that are integral for the sustainability of our communities and for our region as a whole. And throughout our 30-year history, we've conserved over 250,000 acres of land across our rural, urban, and wild landscapes, working to protect places like our working farms and forests, recreational trails, and more recently in our cities, protecting space for communities to have affordable housing and a small business. And so it's with this approach of working across our landscapes, urban, rural, and wild, that we came to this issue. And we think there's a real opportunity to support our rural economies, to support a product that's going to help build our cities, and to support restoration in our forest. And so what is cross-laminated timber? This is cross-laminated timber. And so it's this is a small sample of it, but basically what it is a large-scale, prefabricated, engineered wood panel. And you can see here, CLT panels consist of an odd number of layers, usually 3 to 7. And they're stacked in alternating directions, then bonded together with structural adhesives, and then pressed to form a solid rectangular panel. And while at the mill, CLT panels are cut to size to include door and window openings, and that's using state-of-the-art routers that are capable of making really complex cuts. And so CLT is commonly used for long spans in walls, floors, and roofs. And finished panels are typically 2 to 10 feet wide, with lengths up to 60 feet and thickness up to 20 inches. The product is lightweight but strong. And because it's prefabricated, it offers a really fast installation, virtually no waste on site, and design flexibility. It also offers the potential for less truck traffic and quieter work sites as well. And it's pretty hard to beat the sights and smells of wood in construction. And so for all these reasons, that CLT is really becoming a strong alternative to conventional construction products like steel, masonry, and concrete. And again, what's really exciting about this is our potential to support our rural communities, especially timber communities, to help meet our city's desired growth targets in terms of building tall wood buildings. There's potential carbon benefits when the product is responsibly sourced, and to support our forests. And so by cutting down small diameter trees that can contribute to forest fires, this can play a big role. And so over the last few years, Forterra has been leading a statewide cross-sector coalition to look at how do we accelerate a market for CLT in the state. And we've played a convening role bringing together lots of stakeholders, our academic research institutions like WSU and UW, architects and builders, elected officials, government agencies like Commerce and DNR, environmental groups, and timber companies, all trying to figure out how do we break the barriers to a thriving market for CLT. And in the pamphlets I passed around, you can see more about the work and who's on our leadership team. But throughout this process, we've engaged with hundreds of individuals and organizations through meetings, events, and where a lot of the work is happening is in action teams that are looking at identifying areas that we can break these barriers and look to do the work to address them. And so one of those is figuring out how do we grow demand for tall wood buildings. And first we wanted to look at, well, what is the local demand for CLT? And so working with WSU and University of Washington, Forterra did a study in late 2010 that specifically predicts the volume of finished CLT product in tall wood buildings, and that's based on projected construction within the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, and between the periods 2016 to 2035. And the study suggests that on an annual basis, by 2035, we could be producing 6 to 12 million cubic feet for CLT panels in 4+ story construction types. And just to get a sense of what that means in terms of the overall timber harvest, that's about 1% of the annual Pacific Northwest timber harvest. And then moving on, the results also suggest that this demand can support at least 4 CLT manufacturing facilities by 2035. And that number grows when considering an expanded suite of potential construction types below 4 stories, so schools and warehouses, as well as potential demand coming from outside of the Pacific Northwest region. And we know that given our resources and given our excellent ports, that there's certainly potential for demand outside of the Pacific Northwest. And lastly, it should just be noted that the demand estimated by the study would support timber harvesting, sawmilling, and value-added wood industry jobs in resource-dependent communities. And would also create downstream opportunities in advanced manufacturing, engineering, architecture, and construction sectors. And so one of the ways that we've tried to catalyze demand is through demonstration projects that show the strengths and potential of CLT. And we've worked to get direct government support to fund these demonstration projects. And here is a time-lapse video of one of the sites that has been funded out of the state capital budget. So the state funded $5.5 million to construct CLT classrooms across the state. this one here is in Sequim. There's a site in Seattle and Beacon Hill. And you can see here that you have the prefabricated panels coming together with the crane able to easily put them in place. There's fewer actual pieces on site, and the construction site itself is pretty small. So through funding projects like this, as well as a few others, library up in La Conner, a supportive housing project in Spokane, and a visitor center in Aberdeen, we're demonstrating the potential of CLT. And we certainly hope that we can continue to partner with the state and with our local jurisdictions to identify additional opportunities to highlight CLT and really ensure that Washington State is a leader in this exciting new product. And here, just a picture on the ground with the crane and the workers on site. You can see the CLT panels inside of the classroom. The panels are used in the walls. Governor Inslee is excited about CLT, and so are the kids. Moving on, sorry, there seems to be an error with the slides, but building codes is another area that is really important in terms of boosting demand for CLT here in the state and really across the world. And so it's really important that our building codes support the fact that CLT can be used for construction in mid-rise and even high-rise construction. Currently, the structural use of mass timber is limited to buildings up to 6 stories. But fortunately, there's been an effort at the International Code Council through what they have is an ad hoc Tallwood committee that's developed code changes that are going through a process this year with a final vote in November to allow for the structural use of mass timber CLT in construction up to 18 stories. And what's really exciting is that just a couple of weeks ago, they had a committee vote on these proposed changes, and they were the vote was almost unanimous. So we're optimistic that these will be supported in late fall. And a request to you, if your jurisdictions have are members of the International Code Council, we really hope that they can go out, be present, and be voting in support of these changes. And locally, at the state level, this session there was legislation that was voted overwhelmingly in both the House and Senate and sponsored by Senator Mark Elias that requires the State Building Code Council to adopt rules for mass timber. And this is important because if we can, at the state level, pass these updates to allow for taller wood buildings, it really presents an opportunity for the state to be a leader in mass timber and CLT, and to get those projects on the ground and going before other states are able to. So we're certainly hopeful that the State Building Code Council will be taking this up soon, and we'll be monitoring that effort. And lastly, there's opportunity at the local level with our local building and planning departments to also be leaders in adopting code changes. And so would also encourage anyone to have that conversation at the local level and again to be able to get these projects going quickly. And then lastly, in terms of production and supply, production facility development certainly requires significant capital investment, which is challenging in unproven markets. And so we've, as a coalition, have been looking at how we can support the development of CLT manufacturing facilities here in the state. Currently, we have none of them. There are facilities in Oregon, up in BC, and Montana. Thankfully, There are 2 CLT facilities that will be going online by next year, both on the east side of the state in Katera in Spokane Valley and Vaughan Timbers in Colville. But there's also been interest here on the western side of the state from places like Darrington, Tacoma, Vancouver, Port Angeles, and we want to see how we can be able to support the development of additional CLT facilities to especially supply the market here in the Puget Sound. And so whether that's through direct government support or other means, our coalition is looking at this closely. And then just wrapping up here, there's a lot to talk about in terms of CLT and mass timber, and so this is just kind of a broad overview. And so we certainly hope to speak with any of you in more depth about the opportunities here. Our work has been funded through the U.S. Forest Service Wood Innovations Program, and we'll be hoping to continue that work with funding from them. And the goal is to continue this coalition effort to bring all these different stakeholders together, but also to be looking at it at a statewide level, but to also be thinking about how can we support CLT in our local jurisdictions, and really shifting the focus to thinking about how we can get projects built on the ground and how we can incentivize CLT projects through land use, through building codes, and through other means. So thank you, everyone, and I'm happy to speak with you more about this.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. We have some questions here. So, Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Wen.
I have 3 short questions. One is, do you slice the wood, or you have wood chips to do lamination? That's number 1. Number 2, have you tested the test result of the strength, toughness, and the fatigue? What kind of that result compared to steel? Then the third question is, have you do the test under the earthquake scenario, like how many earthquake scale 9 can sustain or is going to fall down?
Yeah, specifically I can get you more detailed information, but in terms of seismic testing, it's tested positively for that.
What scale can you test? Because the scale 2 is totally different than scale 9.
Right. Yeah, in terms of specifics, I can get back to you on that. But overall, it's tested really positively. In terms of your other question was about the strength. It's comparable to steel or concrete in terms of strength, but also it's a lightweight product. So you have that combination of a lightweight and strong product. And then your first question was?
Are you made of compressed wood chip or with
Sliced.
Sliced in different directions?
Yeah.
If there is some published
Excuse me, could you turn your microphone on?
If there is a published result with how the engineering strength is, will give public a much more confidence of it can sustain.
Yeah.
Because we are suffering with scale 9
Sure.
potential.
Yeah, those studies are out there, and I can get that to you.
Okay.
Yeah, Matt, we'd be happy to pass that along to all of our board members as follow-up,
Yep.
some of those reports and analysis.
Go to Mr. Bonlander first, and Commissioner Stracklejohn is next.
I just want to thank you for coming here. This is CLT has huge, presents huge opportunity for rural economic growth. It's a greenhouse gas reducer because it replaces cement and steel, and as you said, it's lighter, has all these other benefits. So I'm glad you're doing it. There's buildings up in the world that do this, particularly in Europe, and they've they're moving ahead with building code issues. I am interested in knowing to what extent anybody's been working with any developers or builders like Vulcan or Amazon to try to line up some buildings for construction in the event that the international body passes their the new rules and those are adopted on a state and local level, is anybody ready to go with some big projects?
Specifically in terms of Vulcan or Amazon, yeah, I'm not sure. There's certainly, we've heard throughout the region that there's a lot of interest in doing tall wood buildings, but it's dependent upon these, as you say, these code changes that will allow for taller buildings. And so there's interest, and there's sort of a wait and see mentality in terms of being able to actually go forward with the project and have more of that information.
Commissioner Stracklejohn, and then Mr. Powers is next.
Matt, thank you for your presentation. I'm just pleased to see a product like this out there on the market for several reasons. I got a couple questions, but born and raised here in the state of Washington, coming from the timber industry and community, we are a timber community, and we started that way many, many years ago. And it's a renewable resource, and great job with it. I see nothing but just opportunity in this, especially in a national trade arena where you could possibly do prefab type of housing and ship it. It's obviously lighter than concrete and so forth. Do you have a cost comparison between PT construction, post-tension type construction versus this?
I don't have that available right now, but I can try and find that for you.
Okay, that'd be interesting. And as well, this picture, there's great weather. Where is this?
So that's up in British Columbia, and so we hope to see. And so that's, if I'm remembering correctly, that's Brock Commons up there. It's an 18-story mass timber building, and so we hope the next time we update that pamphlet that we can put a photo of a mass timber CLT building here in Washington State.
Great job. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Powers, and then Ms. Capistrani is next.
Thank you, Terry. Great presentation, fascinating, learned a lot. The composite weaving or lamination, is when you weave or cross lam wood, is it like a composite structure so that you actually end up with a stronger piece than you would if it was a solid piece of wood?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's really a hunk of sequestered carbon. Is it eligible for carbon credits? Are they still of value?
That's a good question. Obviously, the wood will retain any carbon that lives in it throughout the duration of its lifespan. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
And the third, you spoke in terms of the cubic foot capacity using this building material, which is a term that's normally reserved just for industrial, large warehouse, high clearance type buildings. But my sense is, with space being more important than square foot area, we're going to more and more look at buildings and infrastructures in a cubic foot capacity as opposed to a square. Do you see modeling this as far as the cost and its ability, whether you're in a school classroom or a house or a 4-story apartment, building out cubic feet as opposed to what is today commonly referred to as traditional square feet?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's something we can look at a lot more closely as a coalition and to learn more about that for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Capistrani?
Sure, and I want to echo all the earlier comments about the opportunity. My question is, have you talked with the fire marshals? What's the fire, since they have a lot of influence over building codes and building code changes, are they on board with this? Have you checked any of that information?
Yeah, so I mentioned the International Code Council, and those code changes were developed with fire marshals at the table and developing them, and voted on recently through the committee where there's fire marshals on that committee. So certainly there's been discussions, and in terms of fire testing, it does well. So absolutely, that's an important component of this.
Okay, great. Ms. Ayala-Vera, and then Mr. Kendall.
Just briefly, I think this is a great product, and I'm excited that you guys are doing it. I know it sounds a little weird, but the Navy partners with nonprofits to do land conservation, to keep it in forestry, which is a really tough thing to do nowadays. You know, that those communities, you know, they're losing the job skills, you know, and the equipment and so forth. So I'm really excited you guys are doing that. The thought that there might be another mill coming back is awesome. And, you know, it supports growth management, because the minute those timber companies with those big properties start selling them off, they turn them over to real estate and they become, you know, residential development on 20-acre lots and 10-acre lots. So that's not a compatible use for us, you know, so we love it when it's working land, and we want to thank you for that work.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Kendall.
Thank you. Matt, toward the beginning, you had some action items for us, things we could do at the EDD level, but also at the local level and through various associations. Can you send those out to everybody through the EDD staff? Because there's some things we can be doing to be helpful now. So thanks for that. But if you could send that, I tried to take a couple notes, but I think if you could send it around, that would be good.
And I'll just repeat it quickly. If we can support actual CLT projects on the ground, and then looking, you know, in terms of what we can do to incentivize CLT in terms of our land use policy, building codes, that's just a start. And so we can, you know, love to talk about that more.
Matt, first of all, thank you very much for coming in today. There's a lot of great opportunities with this product, and really appreciate the presentation. Jason, did you have anything you wanted to add to this, or Josh?
Just that we got a number of follow-ups. There's a lot of information that Matt has, a lot of homework he has, so we will work with him. We'll get together some of that information and some ways that the board and board members can get engaged, either at this board level or at their organizations back at home.
You had great questions about data and follow-up, so we'll get that disseminated to all of you. But following up on Bruce Kendall's point, you know, we think there could be an opportunity here for collaboration, and you know, maybe it is an action item that we bring forward to you. Maybe it is not. Maybe it's a pilot. So we just wanted to kind of get this board up to speed on an emerging opportunity. It has a nexus with the data in our strategy, looking at supporting jobs in rural parts of our region, and sounds like you have some interest, so let's work on this together and see if we can bring something back.
Okay. Also, we have some people on the phone. Is there anyone on the phone that would have some questions about this? Just crickets. Okay, that's fine. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay. Well, we want to respect everybody's time. We're going to try and get you out on time every meeting when we can. You're about 15 minutes early, so we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.